Hope, is it a cure to all of our ailments in the physical world? Or is it a foolish man's poison that he mistakenly thought of as medicine? In 1957, a Harvard graduate and professor at Johns Hopkins University, Dr. Kurt Richter, experimented with 12 domesticated rats to see how long they could survive in a bucket filled with water. The question on Richter's mind was how long would the rats survive given their dire predicament. 9 out of the 12 rats threaded the water for 40 to 60 hours before eventually succumbing to their physical limitation and drowned. He then gathered more rats, but this time, before the rats were about to give up, he took them out, patted them dry, and allowed them to refill their energy before placing them back into the water. Once back, the rats swam 60 to 80 hours non-stop. But what changed? What differs the first and the second experiment is hope. The rats were given hope when they were plugged out of the water to recharge their energy. They were aware that their situation is not hopeless as long as they continue to tread. They will be able to survive. Hope is an incredible motivating factor for perseverance and resilience, even among the tiny rodents creatures. There was another experiment, but it involves wild rats instead of domesticated ones. The wild rats drowned in minutes when they were placed in the water. Why the drastic difference? The wild rats had no concept of hope, as they never had any intervention from humans before in the wild. On the other hand, the domesticated rats had experience with humans as they were fed and taken care of by them. Viktor Frankl, an Austrian psychiatrist, who in 1942 had his life turned upside down, when he and his family were transported to the Nazi concentration camp. During his time in the concentration camp, he had witnessed many horrendous things, including the death of his family members and the inhumane treatment from the prison's guard. His 1946 book, Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl observed that inmates that are able to connect to a purpose of life and immerse themselves in the imagining of that purpose were more likely to survive compared to those who had lost hope. So, the way the prisoners imagined or hoped for their future is the main determinant for their survival, at least to endure the suffering of the labor and the horrible living conditions. In life or in the concentration camp, if one loses hope, then one is bound to succumb to one's fate. The experience in the concentration camp made Frankl come to the conclusion that the meaning of life could be found every day and at every moment, even in the midst of needless suffering and death. Much of Frankl's psychoanalyst is rooted in the notion that man's greatest desire is to find meaning in his life, or what he calls it, the will to meaning. And if he is able to do so, then he can endure anything. For instance, Frankl uses his suffering in the concentration camp as a means to develop himself as an individual, so his purpose in life was to become better through the suffering. This is the central idea for his school of psychotherapy known as logotherapy, where the word logo is derived from the Greek word that means meaning. The human's will is a strong one, and in order to maintain its strength and tenacity, we must maintain hope, because to hope is to believe in the possibilities of the future event, which then gives us meaning to continue on. Similar to Stoicism's philosophy of the dichotomy of control, Frankl also believes that man's attitude towards life, regardless of his peril circumstances, is ultimately up to himself. Much of our environment and situation may not be within our full control, but we do have the free will to choose how we react to such fate. In the concentration camp, the prisoners share the same experience, but prisoners could either become apathetic and accept their fate, or find purpose in their hopeless circumstances, which is ultimately within their control. But what is hope? The standard analysis of hope is that it is a combination of both the desired outcome of future events and the belief in those possibilities materializing into reality. However, not everything we desire or believe in is hope, as hope requires us to engage with the desired and belief in a distinguished way. For example, for the prisoners, they need to actively visualize their desired outcome and interact with it in a way that makes it seem to be realistic, such as conversing with their loved ones. This is hope because we engage with it and believe in it. Traditionally, hope is often viewed as a virtuous thing, as it enables all beings to progress toward that future possibilities. Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher who is recognized as one of the most influential and controversial Western philosophers, pointed out that hope allows human reason to relate to questions that could not be answered merely through experience. In his view, all that humans could hope for is the attainment of the highest good, which is demanded by the moral law, and every rational creature is bound by such law. Although this argument does not follow the standard definition of hope, which is to believe in the future possibilities. If we were to view such an argument from the standard definition, we could argue that Kant believes that hope is intrinsically tied to our moral pursuits and the continuous journey towards moral perfection. So, in essence, Kant's philosophy suggests that our hope should be directed towards continuous moral improvement and the pursuit of the highest good, which we believe as an attainable objective. It is, however, not about achieving a state of eternal happiness or union with a god, but about striving towards the highest good as dictated by moral law. Here, hope acts like a compass that gives meaning to our lives, which is to constantly improve our morals. However, not all hope deals with the physical world. There is hope that is ingrained within humanity since the dawn of time because of our innate fear of death. We fear death, so we do everything we can to keep ourselves alive. But no matter what, death will catch on. In a desperate attempt, we conjure the image or the hope for the afterlife to comfort ourselves that death is not the end. However, is the hope for the afterlife a cure to our fear of death, or a poison that will consume us? Plato, in the Apology of Socrates and Phaedo, argued that the hope for the afterlife is a rational one. Reflect in this way too, that there is good hope that death is a blessing. For Socrates, death means one of two things. First is the total annihilation of oneself, where we enter a dreamless sleep. He views this as an advantage by pointing out to us to recall the most pleasant night, even for a king, is a night where he slept without having a dream, as then, all of eternity is nothing but a single night. Or, on the other hand, death is the relocation of oneself from the false jury on earth to the true jury in Hades, where we will be judged. In the underworld, Socrates claimed that he is willing to die repeatedly to be in the company of Orpheus and Musaeus, Hesiod and Homer in the underworld. Either way, death should not be feared, as the afterlife is good, regardless which of the two will occur. No one knows whether death may not be the greatest of all blessings for a man, yet men fear it as if they knew that it is the greatest of evils. In this argument, Socrates presented reasons to why these hopes are rational and a result of thoughtful reflection. Thus, we can hope that the afterlife is good. However, there are two sides to human nature regarding death. Since the dawn of time, humanity has feared death. Death is a scary concept, and humans have long tried to avoid it. The first emperor of China was reportedly drinking mercury, believing it to be a potion that would bring him immortality, only to have that very thing make him lose his mind slowly until his eventual death. Thus, if he had hope for an afterlife being good, would his demise be avoided? Humanity has also made up myths and stories to cope with the unknowns of the world and death itself. So by conquering such fear through hope for a better afterlife, we rid ourselves of the chain that bound all of us. We could live life without needing to be held back by such fear of death because death is good. Plato may also view hope as a virtues thing, or a risk worth taking, as long as the outcome of the hope is probable, as determined through the process of philosophical justification. During the Persian invasion of Athens, the Athenians were greatly outnumbered, plus other city-states did not come to their aid during the first attack. So, during the next attack, the Athenians expected the same. Here, Plato declared that desperate hope, or the unlikely future good, may be good sometime, as it helps the Athenians to sustain their willpower to continue resisting the invasion. So, although desperate hope may be false on occasion, it may have a positive psychological and practical effect. The world's religion is vast, and there is no definite way to define what a religion is. However, across time and culture, religion seems to have shared features as it deals with the prevention of illness, divinity, and the power that governs life and death. Religion appeared around 11,000 years ago and serves various purposes on an individual and societal level. One of the main roles of religion is to cope and tolerate the suffering and uncertainty that comes with life. And one instrument to achieve such a thing is hope. The hope for salvation and the hope for the afterlife are all part of hope within religious context. The 19th century Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard argues that hope is necessary for human agency and selfhood. In The Sickness Unto Death, Kierkegaard asserted that when one loses hope or courage, one will fall into the pit of despair. His hope is characterized by the trust and confidence that the good in the future will occur, even if it is uncertain. Thus, he emphasizes the importance for us to have hope, regardless of our current predicament, as to hope is to expect good. Much of Kierkegaard's value on hope comes from his deeply religious belief, so his hope should transcend all understanding and form of reasoning. However, Søren Kierkegaard distinguishes two types of hope. One is the temporal hope, which are hopes that all humans have, such as wanting to remain youthful forever, or anything that pertains to the human's desire. This type of hope, according to Kierkegaard, should be abandoned as it depends largely on the current world's affairs, so it can and will lead to misfortune, hardship, and hopelessness. This is contradictory to the statement earlier regarding hope as necessary for human agency and selfhood. So, he advocates the abandonment of the temporal hope in favor of the eternal hope, because humans' desires are limitless, and these desires may be fulfilled too late or not at all, which often leads to disappointment. Eternal hope transcends the temporal and earthly desires. It is the hope for something beyond this world, often associated with hope in God and the afterlife. Kierkegaard believed that true faith involved a passionate commitment to eternal values, and a hope that goes beyond the limitations of the finite world. Thus, most of his view regarding hope is almost always directed toward this eternal hope. Much of the human experience is that of suffering, so to hope is to cope with one's existence. Men want salvation, and hope provides this confidence to continue to live through this life, comforted by the knowledge that the afterlife is one of happiness and one without suffering. Although hope may be essential for us, it may have different interpretations throughout history. Hope may be viewed as an attitude of an ignorant man who may be easily swayed by wishful thinking. This view is not without its merits. Søren Kierkegaard believes that man may not be able to achieve self-actualization if he indulges too much in the imaginary world. In the case of hope, a wishful thinking of the impossible futures. So if one indulges too much in the imaginary future that one may confuse to be as hope, then that person may sacrifice their present for a temporary indulgence, or using hope as an excuse to be lazy instead of working honestly for his living. As Søren Kierkegaard puts it, they misuse their imagination to generate endless possibilities, so they end up postponing or avoiding current decision and action. While Socrates compares hope to the pleasure of the anticipation of the future. Additionally, although Plato views hope as a positive thing, he also views hope to be stored together with anger or passion within the human body, and both are separate from humans' reasoning. Hope is detached from humans' reasoning, and passion is an emotion state that is easily swayed and susceptible to manipulation. Then hope may lead people to pursue things that they falsely thought were good. Moreover, hopes that are unlikely should be discouraged, because it is neither virtuous or practical from an action standpoint. At the end of the day, although hope may misguide us to pursue things that we may not really want to pursue, it does not corrupt our character or threaten social order. In The Human, All Too Human by Nietzsche, he said, "Hope is the worst of evils, for it prolongs the torment of man." Nietzsche recognizes the suffering that is inherent with existence, so it could be suggested that hoping for a better day is futile because it does not exist. Here, he is directing his criticism toward misdirected hope, because this hope tends to lead people astray, and toward a path of escapism, usually through seeking out relief of suffering by expecting a better future state. Moreover, some people may use this hope as a form of escaping their responsibilities and reject the realities of existence. Suffering will continue to persist regardless, so by holding on to hope, we are denying the natural state of the world, hence keeping us in a state of longing, frustration, disappointment, and unfulfilled. The discussion on pessimism regarding life would be incomplete if we exclude the renowned pessimist philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. Although Schopenhauer also sees hope as a source of motivation for humans, his overarching outlook on hope is similar to his outlook on life, which is filled with pessimism. Although Schopenhauer sees hope as a natural human desire, he argues that we ought to hope less, because hope is the confusion between the desire that something should take place with the probability that it will, which he considered as folly to the heart. So this confuses the intellect between the illusion of future possibilities and the chance of those possibilities occurring, resulting in the failing to grasp the truth. If we view hope as a form of desire, which is a desire for future possibilities according to the standard definition, then hope will lead to nothing but disappointment. According to Schopenhauer, human desires are endless, and even if we attained such desired possibilities, we would continue to experience dissatisfaction and suffering because it either results in an unrealized hope or a realized hope, but not to the extent of our expectation. Thus, to hope is to desire, and desire is the root of our suffering, since our desire could never be truly fulfilled. And even if it is fulfilled, it will lead to either boredom or suicide. Others may view hope as an absurd thing to do. Albert Camus argues that life is inherently absurd and is devoid of any meaning and purpose. But what makes a man absurd is not his ignorance of the absurdity, but his ability to have hope in spite of it. This is what Camus calls the absurd man. Then we can argue that we should not hope because life in of itself lacks any meaning, so regardless of what he hopes for, this fact about our meaningless existence could not be changed. To hope is to be confident in the fact that the future possibilities will occur. To lose hope is to lose such confidence, and in a sense losing the will to believe. Without a purpose to walk toward, we are bound to become nihilistic and suffer. Then, in essence, hope is humanity's medicine against suffering. Humans are curious creatures, and we crave to find purpose within our existence, and hope is one of the tools that could guide us toward that purpose. However, to hope is also to be engaging in the act of deceiving oneself to the illusion of future possibilities. Our existence is nothing but suffering, so by hoping that the future will be better, we are just prolonging our suffering because we delay our acknowledgement to the fact that life will never get better. Thus, we can argue that hope is nothing but a poisonous pill that we decided to call it as a cure.